There's our bell. So I want to welcome everyone to this morning's hearing to review the Federal Interagency Research Initiative in Networking and Information Technology, known as NITRD program. Information technology is a major driver of the economic growth. It creates high-wage jobs, provides for rapid communications throughout the world, and provides the tools for acquiring knowledge and insight from information. Advances in computing and communications have a broad impact. For example, information technology helps to make workplace more productive, to improve the quality of health care, and to make government more responsive and accessible to the needs of our citizens. In short, networking and information technology is an essential component of the U.S. scientific, industrial, and military competitiveness. Rigorous long-term research is essential to realize the potential benefits of information technology. Many of the technical advances that led to today's computers and the Internet result from federally sponsored research in partnerships with industry and universities. The depth and strength of U.S. capabilities in information technology stem in part from the sustained research and development program carried out by the federal research agencies under the program codified by the High Performance Computing Act of 1991. The Science Technology Committee has a long history of encouragement and support for research on information technologies and played a prominent role in the development of the passage of the 1991 Act. The Act created a multi-agency R&D program to accelerate the development of information technology and to attack challenging computation, science, and engineering problems. Also, it put in place a formal process for planning and budgeting for the activities carried out under the program. The fiscal year 2008 budget for this interagency program is $3.3 billion. The agencies provided the largest portions of this funding are the Department of Defense, the National Science Foundation, the Department of Energy, and the National Institutes of Health. I believe the NITRD program has been largely a success. It has made a substantial contribution to moving computation to an equal place alongside theory and experiment for conducting research in science and engineering. Moreover, it has developed the computing and networking infrastructure needed to support leading-edge research and to drive the technology forward for a range of commercial applications that benefit society broadly. The President's Council on Advisors on Science and Technology, the PCASC, recently carried out an assessment of NITRD program. This assessment raises some significant issues about whether NITRD program is allocating its resources in ways to achieve the maximum payoffs. PCASC makes a series of recommendations that identify research areas needing additional resources and suggests that modes of research support provided by the program are less than optimum. In particular, PCASC believes that NITRD program should provide more of its funding for conducting high-risk, high-reward research and support more large-scale interdisciplinary research projects. It also recommends that NITRD program institute a strategic planning process to strengthen priority setting under the program. I believe that PCASC raises issues that need to be seriously considered and then addressed as appropriate through the legislative adjustments to the NITRD authorization statute. This hearing is the first step in the process, which the committee will conduct next year. To assist us in developing of the legislation, this hearing provides the opportunity to receive views of expert witnesses on findings and recommendations of the PCASC assessment of the NITRD program. I'm also interested in any comments or suggestions that the witnesses may have on other aspects of the program that are not covered by the PCASC assessment, but which could lead to more effective program. And I want to thank our witnesses for their attendance at this hearing and look forward to discussions. And now I recognize my friend, Mr. Hall, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Gordon, for scheduling an oversight hearing of NITRD program. Of course, this program provides the primary mechanism by which the federal government coordinates this nation's more than $3 billion of unclassified networking and information technology research and development investments. And you were absolutely correct in highlighting the PCASC report that, to boil it down, they simply said, quote, it's essential to U.S. economic prosperity, security, and quality of life. So given the the ever-increasing amounts of networking and information technology that affect our everyday lives, from power grid and water purification systems to automotive improvements and air traffic control equipment to home health care devices and educational software programs. It is important that we not only continue to support these R&D efforts, but also make sure that this program is appropriately coordinating with our classified cybersecurity initiatives as well. In fact, I believe that this is of vital importance to our homeland security and to our economy. We have before us today an esteemed panel of NIT experts, and I look forward to hearing their views on how to make an already exemplary interagency program even better. And I yield back my time.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. At this time, we normally ask if members want to submit their opening statements, but since Mr. Sensenbrenner has because of his new status, we'll allow him to make any statements that he would like to at this time.
Mr. Sensenbrenner is a man of few words unless they're really necessary. Not this morning, I thank the chair.
If that's the case, then if members would like to submit additional opening statements, they will be added to the record at this point. At this time, I would like to introduce our witnesses, and we have a very distinguished group here. First, Dr. Chris Greer is the Director of NITRD National Coordination Office. Welcome. Dr. Daniel Reed is the Director of Scalable and Multicore Computing at Microsoft. Dr. Craig Stewart is the Associate Dean of Research and Technologies at the Indiana University and is representing the Coalition of Academic and Scientific Computation. And finally, Dr. Don Winter is the Vice President of Engineering and Information Technology at the Phantom Works at the Boeing Company. Our witnesses should know we try to limit our spoken testimony to 5 minutes each, which then members will have an opportunity to question for 5 minutes. But this is an important topic. We have members at a variety of other hearings today, and so we want to be sure we get all the information. So please feel free to if you need a few more minutes to give us what you think is best, we want to hear from that. At this point, now we will open our first and so let's start with Dr. Greer.
Good morning. I'm Chris Greer, Director of the National Coordination Office for Networking and Information Technology, Research and Development, the NITRD program. I thank Chairman Gordon, Ranking Member Hall, and the members of the committee for the opportunity to come here today and discuss this important issue with you. I'm also accompanied by a number of members seated behind me of the NCO NITRD staff, and it's an honor to sit here and represent the remarkable work of that group. And I commend this committee for initiating the High Performance Computing Act of 1991 and its subsequent amendments with its remarkably far-sighted mandate for R&D coordination. The resulting federal program, now in its 17th year, has become a model for multi-agency cooperation. The program has grown substantially in size and scope since 1991. Today, NITRD encompasses $3.5 billion in R&D across 13 member agencies as of the President's 2009 budget. NITRD investments further our nation's goals for national defense and national security, healthcare, energy, education, economic competitiveness, environmental sustainability, and other national priorities. My written testimony provides detailed responses to the questions the committee asked me to address. And in my remarks today, I want to highlight strategic planning. This is NITRD's main program-wide coordination activity, and Appendix 3 of that written testimony provides a detailed timeline for that strategic planning and road mapping process. But in fact, even if the PCASC, the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, hadn't recommended that NITRD develop a strategic plan, it would still be the right time in the program's history to consider where NITRD is going and how we can better manage that journey. The networking and IT landscape is shifting rapidly and major new national challenges are emerging. The program has recently been tasked, for example, with expanded coordination responsibilities under the Federal Plan for Advanced Networking R&D and the administration's comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative. The PCASC assessment of NITRD, with its provocative and important focus on rising global competition for networking and IT leadership, sharpens our thinking about the role of strategic planning in shaping NITRD growth and change to meet national needs. The PCASC reports 17 recommendations, 7 of which go to the issue of planning, provide a unique opportunity to make progress toward our goals. The NITRD subcommittee last November approved development of a comprehensive strategic plan for NITRD and authorized my office to add a technical staff member dedicated to support of that activity. The NITRD subcommittee has agreed that the plan should be, first, vision-driven with a theme of complexity in multiple dimensions. Second, focused on goals and capabilities that can only be achieved through interagency cooperation and coordination, and the R&D capabilities and challenges required to achieve those goals. It should also be predictive of an effective organizational structure for the NITRD program. As shown on the timeline in my written testimony, NITRD Strategic Planning Task Group is working intensively on the plan now, including steps to solicit broad private sector input to the planning process. A request for input has just now been published in the Federal Register and widely disseminated to academia, to industry, and to professional organizations. A national workshop planned for November 2008 will provide a second opportunity for public input, and the final draft will be posted for public comment in early 2009. That timeline also shows that PCASC recommendations on assessing the alignment of the NITRD research areas, initiating an NCO plan to support the overall planning process, and preparing a fast-track education study are also being addressed. Other PCASC recommendations will be integrated into the NITRD planning enterprise as the comprehensive strategic plan takes shape and provides the larger context. Now, upon completion of this strategic plan, we anticipate providing a point-by-point response to the PCASC recommendations informed and supported by that plan. We agree with PCASC that leadership in networking and information technology is essential to U.S. economic prosperity, security, and the quality of life. The federal investments we make in research and development in this area are the keys to a future of promise for our nation and for its citizens. I look forward to working with the Congress to fulfill that promise. Thank you.
Right on the money, Dr. Greer. Dr. Reed, you're up.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Dan Reed. I'm chair of the Board of Directors of the Computing Research Association and co-chair of the PCASC subcommittee that produced the 2007 NITRD program assessment. Today I'd like to make 5 points regarding the NITRD program, followed by a set of specific recommendations for the future. Information technology, as Dr. Greer noted, driven by basic research investments, has transformed our society and our economy. Imagine a world without personal computers, without mobile devices or the internet, without predictive computational models or deep data. The future can be even more amazing if we stay in our IT research ecosystem. Historically, the diversity of the NITRD agencies has been a major strength of U.S. IT research, fostering multiple approaches to complex problems. The internet began as a DARPA project, grew with NSF support, and blossomed with commercial funding. The Human Genome Project was a triumph of biomedicine and IT, based and building on funding from NIH, from DARPA, from NSF, the Department of Energy, and it birthed personalized medicine. This brings me to the issue of balancing risk and protection. Today, I believe the NITRD ecosystem's health is threatened due to an overdependence on a single funding source and inadequate research funding overall. DARPA's retreat from fundamental computing research at U.S. universities has unbalanced the NITRD ecosystem. NSF now provides 86% of all academic IT research funding, and fierce competition has driven researchers to focus excessively on short-term, low-risk research projects. Like a stock portfolio, our long-term success depends on balance, planning, and regular reassessment. And this leads to my third point, NITRD coordination and planning. In general, I believe the NITRD programs effectively fostered informal communication and coordination among agencies, and I commend the National Coordination Office for its role in this aspect. However, the focus on individual agency agendas has made the NITRD program less effective in managing coordinated projects, particularly multidisciplinary ones of rising importance. This leads to my fourth point about research opportunities and foci. In 2007, PCAST revisited the priority areas identified by PTAC in 1999, concluding that they remain deeply relevant, including, I should add as a personal anecdote, high-performance computing, something in which I've been involved for many years. IT systems that interact with the physical world, however, a special case of the more general issue of software systems, emerged as a new top priority. These cyber-physical systems embed computing, sensors, and actuators, and objects that span scales from our critical national infrastructure to implanted biomedical devices. Their creation requires workers with new and ever more multidisciplinary skills. This brings me to the issue of sustaining our IT workforce. Today, information technology has a serious image problem. It affects our workforce quantity, its diversity, and its Many groups are working very hard to address stereotypes and create new multidisciplinary curricula, but much work remains in this area. I believe we must also do more to retain the best and brightest international students who obtain graduate degrees here, many of whom are supported by federal research grants and contracts. Simply put, our international competitiveness depends on the availability of a qualified and diverse workforce. This leads to my recommendations for the future. To ensure the health of the U.S. IT ecosystem, we should fully fund the America's Competes Act. This will fuel the IT innovation engine, the fundamental research by U.S. universities and national laboratories, and further broaden STEM-based education. And I commend you, Mr. Chairman, and your colleagues for your continuing support of America Competes. Second, I believe we must rebalance participation in the NITRD program so that responsibility for fundamental research is not borne excessively by a single agency. And as Dr. Greer noted, I believe we must create and regularly update a strategic R&D plan and a set of associated metrics that define interagency accountabilities with a mix appropriately of project scales and research risks. Finally, I believe we must regularly review our research investment against that strategic plan. I also believe the NITRD program is best served by a standalone and active PTAC that's composed of computing experts drawn from academia and industry. I say that as someone who served on both PTAC and PCAST. 8 years between overall NITRD reviews is far too long in the information technology industry. By analogy, 8 years and dog years is multiple lifetimes in the computing industry. We need to be more proactive in examining our strategy. Mr. Chairman, thank you and this committee for your continued interest and support in the future of the NITRD program and its importance to U.S. competitiveness and national security. At the appropriate time, I'd be delighted to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Reed, and also thank you for pointing out the need to continue the funding for Competes. I think sometimes the real world out there doesn't understand the difference between an authorization and appropriation, and we've got to continue to move forward, and thank you for bringing that up. I will also point out that in the Competes Act, we did change the review to 2 years, and that we made it a standalone committee also. Dr. Stewart, would love to hear from you.
Let me begin by thanking Chairman Gordon, Ranking Member Mr. Hall, Mr. Hills and Carson of Indiana, and all members of the House Science and Technology Committee for the opportunity to be here today. I'm the chair of the Coalition for Academic Scientific Computation, or CASC. I'm offering testimonies requested by Chairman Gordon regarding the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology 2007 report, Leadership Under Challenge, Information Technology Research and Development in a Competitive World. To provide context for this testimony, CASC is an educational nonprofit organization dedicated to using advanced computing technology to accelerate scientific discovery for national competitiveness, global security, and economic success. There are a total of 53 CASC members, colleges, universities, and research labs in 36 states and the District of Columbia. I note that members of the committee represent a total of 24 states, 19 of which are home to at least one CASC member. As stated in the PCAST report, we must improve the networking and information technology ecosystem in the U.S. to maintain and extend our competitive advantage in innovation. The NITRD program support of 13 federal agencies, including DoD, DOE, DARPA, NASA, NIH, NIST, and NSF, has accelerated information technology innovation and led to new insights in science, technology, and medicine. These advances have led to valuable changes in the private sector, as we all know. CASC fully supports the overall recommendations of the 2007 PCAST report. The recommendations in that report, if well supported by funding and executed aggressively, will contribute greatly to continued U.S. leadership in networking and information technology. With that overarching endorsement as the key point of this testimony, CASC would like to make a few suggestions to emphasize and add to the PCAST recommendations. First, federal investment in NIT research and development will be most valuable in the long run if investment patterns in the many sub-areas included within NITRD are as consistent as possible over time. The PCAST report makes several important recommendations regarding workforce development. We agree with these recommendations and would like to suggest additional areas of emphasis. Programs that will increase the number of students who choose a major related to NIT after entering college undecided on a major, and continue to strengthen and expand the emphasis on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics disciplines in primary and secondary education. We commend Chairman Gordon and the members of the committee as a whole for leadership in creating and supporting the development of the STEM program. We hope that you might consider expanding it to include greater emphasis on computing in the future. CASC would also like to expand on the report's recommendation regarding a strategic roadmap for federal investments in high-end computing research and development. In addition to the recommendations made in the report, such a plan should implement methods for sustained support and maintenance of software critical to the U.S. networking and information technology agenda. This plan should also support the coordination of U.S. high-end computing facilities in a way that maximizes the total benefit to U.S. national interests by leveraging investments at the college, university, state, and regional levels in addition to federal investments. In closing, let me return to the title of the 2007 PCAST report, Leadership Under Challenge. U.S. leadership is indeed under challenge in many ways across the globe. As regards networking and information technology, the current challenges are without precedent. Without strong investment, the U.S. is at risk of losing its longstanding position of global leadership in networking and information technology, and the consequences of that would be catastrophic. However, the recommendations made in the PCAST report, if enacted and well-funded, will continue and extend U.S. leadership in networking and information technology and fuel future U.S. global leadership in innovation generally. This will lead to continued and improved prosperity, health, and security for Americans and indeed all citizens of the world. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you today. I should note that my testimony this morning has been endorsed by a formal vote of CASC members. One CASC member's voting representative was unavailable due to travel. The remaining 52 have voted unanimously to endorse my testimony this morning. I hope that these remarks have been helpful to the committee. I'm happy to answer any questions now or at any time in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Stewart. We want to, as I mentioned earlier, we're in the process of trying to gain more information. The Academy will be an important part of that information. As you know, Baron Hill is fortunately you're a member of Congress, and so he'll be taking a direct role in this, and we want you to be a conduit for information from the Academy, and we want Baron to play a role in that. Thank you very much. And finally, Mr. Don Winter.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Hall, members of the committee. I'm Don Winter, Vice President of Engineering and Information Technology at the Boeing Phantom Works. I'm grateful for this invitation to speak to you on the recommendations set forth for the NITRD program, specifically those focused on cyber-physical systems. I was impressed with the way in which these recommendations were developed, bringing stakeholders from government, academia, and industry together with a common focus on national competitiveness. The PCAST report builds a sound case for the recommended research focus areas, including the area of specific interest to me, cyber-physical systems. Subject research on cyber-physical systems, or CPS, is of great importance to the aerospace industry as a whole and to our nation. The use of CPS is increasing. Their complexity is growing at an exponential rate. Demands for higher performance and lower costs for commercial and military systems are driving next-generation systems to be highly networked and highly dynamic in nature. Moreover, systems will need to be designed to exhibit robust and predictably safe behavior in these highly dynamic environments. Future aerospace systems will require cyber-physical systems of even greater complexity. Systems will operate with high degrees of autonomy, will collaborate among themselves to achieve dramatic gains in operational effectiveness. New cyber-physical system attributes such as active resource management, dynamic scheduling, and software-enabled control mode changes will be needed to support these behaviors. These emerging challenges call for cyber-physical systems on a grand scale. Research that addresses validation and verification of the complex interactions between system modules is critical. Without advances in these technologies, the cost and risk of developing next generation of cyber-physical systems at this scale may be prohibitive and have a significant impact on the industry. Many of our systems are safety critical and require certification by the FAA or equivalent military authority. Many of our military systems will need to support coalition operations with multi-level security requirements. Our systems must also be hardened to withstand future cyber attack. Because of these unique requirements and the relatively small number of end systems, we do not expect to see a large investment from the commercial IT sector in these technologies. In order to achieve these cross-cutting capabilities, we will need advances in design technologies, such as model-based development tools and validation environments to build systems rapidly and affordably. Moreover, we will require research and product-focused technologies, including software reuse, real-time theory, languages, and product line CPS architectures that can be applied to many different end systems. We have achieved some measure of progress. Over the past 10 years, Boeing has developed middleware-based product line CPS architectures, notably the Bold Stroke architecture for tactical aircraft avionics and the System of Systems Common Operating Environment, or SOSCO, for the future combat systems. To support our military system developments, and substantial gains in productivity were realized. What is the way ahead? Efforts to date have been fragmented across industry with limited internal funding constraints, and limited by internal funding constraints, CPS investments across multiple technology domains will require industry-level critical mass to achieve the needed results. Other industries, notably automotive, energy management and control, and medical, face similar CPS trends and pressures and have expressed their desire to participate. We need a national strategy in which long-term CPS technology needs are addressed by combined government and corporate investment. Boeing, for its part, can focus long-term CPS investments on collaborative research in which we provide the challenge problems and in-kind participation in government industry research consortia. While I don't speak for them, I'm confident my industry partners are willing to do the same. We also need to develop new ways to facilitate the transition of research products back to industry and into our products. This point is critical and, again, is a matter of national competitiveness. The European Union's Advanced Research and Technology for Embedded Intelligence Systems, Artemis, program is funded by a public-private investment of over $7 billion and is pursuing R&D to achieve, quote, world leadership in intelligent electronic systems, unquote, by 2016. European industry is fully partnered with government and academia under Artemis. From our perspective, an active partnership of this nature in CPS is essential to reap the benefits of this advanced research. This partnership needs to reach deeper than the arm's-length approach that characterizes industry and development today. In summary, we support the proposed expansion of the NITRD program's research objectives to address cyber-physical systems. We look forward to the opportunity to participate. That concludes my testimony, and I'd be pleased to respond to your questions.
Ms. Miller, as you know, the PCASC top recommendation was the cyber-physical security, and we do want to get more involved in that. So at this point, we will open for the first round of questions, and the chair recognizes himself for 5 minutes. And what I would like to do is I have a couple of questions just to put to the panel in general. The first is the PCASC assessment of NITRD program indicates that it should rebalance the funding portfolios by increasing the support for important problems that require large-scale, long-term, multidisciplinary R&D, and increasing emphasis on innovation and therefore high-risk but potentially higher payoff explorations. Do you agree with this recommendation? If so, what should be done to implement support for such high-scale, large-scale, innovative research projects? And Dr. Greer, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Chairman. I think we would agree with that recommendation of the PCASC assessment that these investments in high risk but high payoff in multidisciplinary undertakings are important, critical in the current IT landscape. As I said, our strategic plan focuses on identifying areas challenges that can only be approached by agencies working together, and the corresponding technical issues to achieve that.
Can you do that under existing funding, or does that require additional funding?
I think we would look to both of those possibilities, that refocusing some existing funding on these shared projects, identifying those things that would substantially enable an agency's mission if it could be accomplished, then that merits some refocusing of funding. There may be other opportunities for added funding in that same category.
Will you be identifying those areas of opportunities and funding?
Yeah, that's part of our strategic planning process, is to look for what are the categories of this type, the multi-agency, higher-level challenges that could be taken on by a joint effort across agencies, in which the missions of the individual agencies are supported by this joint effort.
Anyone else would like to comment on that? Okay.
Well, I should say I hope I agree with the recommendation in this case, since I helped write it. But, just a reminder that the PCASC was not the first time that this observation has been made. Go back and you look at the 1990 PTAC report, last systemic evaluation of the program. It recommended something quite similar, something that was called out as expeditions to the intended to be large-scale integrated investments, technology that could have transformative effect. And I agree with Dr. Greer. It will be a mix of targeted reallocation and most likely some additional investment.
So since this recommendation has been made before, are they behind the curve on getting something done?
There were responses to those recommendations, perhaps not at the scale that the original report recommended, some due to some financial constraints. I think it's difficult to change the culture of investment because, again, it's not just an agency response, it's a community response to the changes that the federal government induces, and there's strong incentives among the community to continue, in many cases, the status quo. So it's not just a government issue, it's a community education issue about the importance of risk and
I only have 5 minutes also, so let me get to my second question. PCASC also recommended that NITRD program provide increased support for research on software, but does not cite specific research needs where the current program is deficient. Software is a perennial area of weakness in information technology and an area in which NITRD program currently allocates resources. What is missing is software research resources limited or idea limited, and what research is needed to make greater progress for improving the capabilities and reliable software. And I think, Dr. Reed, we probably should start with you on that one.
I think it's a question of scale, and to hark back to something that Mr. Winter said as an example of cyber-physical systems, what's happening is our software systems are growing exponentially in size and complexity, but perhaps even more worrisome is that they're not isolated. They control our physical environment in all kinds of day-to-day ways, from national infrastructure to our personal experiences. And the research portfolio, back to the previous question, I think the challenge is to look at how we address software at large scale. There's lots of research on small-scale software issues, but how to deal with large, complex systems where a small group is unlikely to understand its behavior, its reliability, and its dynamics. There's some deep research issues there. Some innovation is required. There are questions, frankly, we don't know the answers to. It's not even, in some cases, clear how to approach solutions to the problems. So they're basic research, but there's also a scale issue about approaching the problem that's challenging at the moment in academics.
And if I could ask, and I'll try to be quick with this, this is a situation we run into so often, is there's simply not enough money being invested. Now, we could get into, where are best priorities and that sort of thing. One area, I think we need to do it through efficiencies in two ways. Certainly the interagency is an excellent approach, and I compliment what you've done. The second is whether or not these are appropriate areas for international cooperation. What is our parochial interest here or first-to-market interest versus international collaboration in terms of trying to bring some economy to the research. Would y'all give me some quick thoughts on that? Anyone that want to?
I'll give a couple of thoughts. I think that we have examples already of international cooperation in our business in areas that are considered to be infrastructure issues versus, issues of proprietary or competitive advantage. We're not in the software business or the IT business. Fundamentally, we're in the system business, aerospace system business. And we believe that areas such as cyber physical system infrastructure investment is something we're willing to do on a collaborative basis with our competitors, with academia, and with international.
Well, let me ask a quick question again. Is there any existing vehicle for that type of collaboration now? Any multinational agency or anything that you know of, Dr. Greer?
This is an important question. There are areas of NIT that are inherently international. The Internet itself is global. Cybersecurity is a global issue. In each of those areas, in the area of large-scale networking, for example, there are a series of organizations that manage the standards development, that manage the network operation, and so on. So in each of those separate areas, there are international organizations. I think the challenge is in coordinating across those international bodies, particularly in the area that Dr. Reed has described, that fundamental research, the software science, the theory and mathematics of software.
My time is up, but I would like for you, that if you have an opinion, to respond to us, again, in this aspect of limited resources but not limited needs, where you think there might be areas for international cooperation, where they're maybe already going on, what are those agencies, and should there be, whatever coordinating body. In other words, how can we get better bang for our buck here without harming ourselves in a first-to-market or proprietary way? Thank you, and Mr. Hall, for taking a little time there. You're certainly recognized.
You are the chairman, Mr. Winter, you mentioned Artemis. You mentioned the need for the U.S. to have something similar to the EU public-private partnership, research technology, and so on and so forth, called Artemis. And although termed an EU program, isn't it true that industry contributes more than half of the funding for this and was responsible for the total startup and operational cost of Artemis?
It's true.
Is that true?
Yeah, this is under the European Framework Program, which is a model for collaborative government-private sector investment.
Do you think the U.S. industry would commit to the same level?
Yes, I do.
Would Boeing?
Yes.
Dr. Reed, would Microsoft?
Microsoft already is in many areas, so I have no doubt about that.
So you think our own industry is up to funding to a greater extent?
I think we're already doing it to a large degree, and it's a matter of coordination being provided by nationally led activity, supplemented by some national or public funding for the academic sector. I think it's more a matter of channeling investments we're already making.
Mr. Hall, you raised a very good point. Could you also respond to us, to the committee, on how we can do that, or your suggestions in that area? I think Mr. Hall raises a very good point. Thank you.
Do we await that?
No.
Oh,
Don't respond to us in writing.
All right. Okay. All right, I think my time's up. I yield back.
Mr. McNerney is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to remark on a comment that Dr. Stewart made. You recommended consistent federal funding, and I just want to say that I feel your pain on this. I spent my career in the renewable energy business, and the production tax credits came and they went, and the industry suffered immensely from those cycles. And I am sure that federal funding on a consistent basis would be better than just about anything else. But then I also echo the chairman's words on this. We can authorize all we want in this committee, and if there's not enough money in the kitty, it's not going to happen. So Dr. Reed mentioned that there's 86% of the funding is come from one single federal agency, and that has its advantages because it allows better coordination, but it has a disadvantage that I didn't quite understand what the disadvantages were. If you would elaborate on that a little bit, Dr. Reed.
Certainly. Historically, as I said, the diversity of agencies had different approaches, and by nature of the agencies and because they have differing missions. And often there is a pipeline of technology, process, and research that leads to its impact in commercial industries. If you look, for example, at some of the major technologies we take for granted now, there's about a 20-year pipeline from basic research till they became billion-dollar or more industry. But in the federal context, that often meant curiosity-driven single investigator research conducted by researchers typically in academia funded by the National Science Foundation. DARPA, on the other hand, tended to focus on much more goal-directed outcome, larger-scale projects, building advanced prototypes in collaboration with industry. But it built on ideas that had often been explored years before by researchers funded by the National Science Foundation. So that interplay of agencies meant that there were different ideas that could be picked up and explored with different mechanisms. It goes back to the interagency collaboration and coordination mechanism, and how that diversity created a variety of approaches to innovation. And what's happened is we've lost some of that diversity, because, certainly in the academic side, clear on that, as opposed to broadly, and so that we only have, to first order, a single approach in academic circles. That's been largely a single faculty member.
So you're talking about sort of an agenda. If it's a single agency, it tends to be agenda-driven rather than giving a diverse set of goals.
Right. You would like multiple goals, multiple agendas, multiple kinds of approaches to select projects for funding, because that leads to different mixes of people, different kinds of outcomes, and we've moved much more toward a single kind of outcome model, where there had been a much more diverse model in the past.
It seems that to me that if you have a well-run program within the NSF, it would accomplish those objectives rather than trying to coordinate different agencies.
It's a balancing act, for sure, and I'm sure Dr. Greer can speak to that as well, who balances that process. But each agency has a different culture, and its culture makes it easier or more difficult for it to do certain things. Some things are much easier to do in a Defense Department model. Some things are much easier to do in an NSF-style model. And it's that culture that the agencies struggle with when we try to foster interagency collaboration and agendas versus the broader sort of integrated IT research.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Winter, I'm interested in your discussion of cyber physical systems. Could you elaborate a little bit on the current threat? What does that look like? How immediate is it? Do we have tools to move forward aggressively on that?
You're referring specifically to cyber attack on
physical cyber attack, yes.
So, cyber physical systems are what we used to call embedded systems, traditionally very isolated and standalone entities. A flight control computer in an aircraft, for example, wasn't subject to any external influence or attack. As these systems evolve to a more collaborative model where they're not only doing hard real-time business on board the platform, but are also participating as clients in a network, they become vulnerable to cyber attack, tampering. The science of cybersecurity for cyber physical systems is really in its infancy. Because these systems have only recently sort of been opened up and made accessible because of their need to, again, service clients on a network. We're just in the early days of beginning to really take on the cyber attack threat for these kinds of systems.
Well, I guess my time's expired, so I'll yield back.
More times had expired, and Ms. Edwards is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one question. I mean, each of you raised the issue of technical capacity training, where are the professionals for the future? And going to this question around cybersecurity, I read an article yesterday about the use of virtualization, particularly in the retail industry, and I wonder what the impact is, specifically, as you just mentioned, Mr. Winter, of the idea of virtualization in these systems where you're trying to achieve efficiency and, and monitor operations, but how vulnerable does that leave us to cyber attacks, and what capacity do we have to address emerging issues in technology? It seems like there's just one every day around security. What's the capacity we have right now to address those emerging issues, given the lack of capacity in the industry and in the federal sector?
I think we do have a capacity issue. Information assurance specialist is one of the most sought after and rare commodities from a skilled personnel standpoint in our industry. We have a few, and we bend over backwards to keep them with us. It's a small and slowly growing pool of specialists, and I think the lack of collective training and a qualified workforce in that area is a real threat. Business, but to many other businesses, financial sector, other aspects of our national IT infrastructure.
Dr. Reed, do you have a?
I absolutely agree with Mr. Winter. There is a shortage of talent in this area, and as I said, because so many of our everyday objects now include embedded intelligence and network connections. There are substantial challenges here. Microsoft, for example, has made trusted computing a major initiative to look at how to make software more robust, because, as you observed rightly, it's subject to a wide range of attacks and every day. Part of this is an inevitable consequence that software permeates almost everything, but it's also an absolute artifact of the original question that Representative Gordon asked about the challenges we face in building large, complex systems and the underlying research issues behind those. This is one example of the manifestation of that. We struggle to build systems from first principles that are reliable and secure, and we often then struggle to retrofit security systems as we discover vulnerabilities. But there are major research issues here, workforce issues. In other venues, people have testified in their new programs to advance the state of cybersecurity research underway now. A lot of work to do without.
And so then, to each of you, I mean, how do you then prioritize where the allocation needs to go for research and development? What areas, because it seems very expansive, and it's clear from your earlier testimony, obviously we haven't been able to fund everything, and we won't.
Funding everything is clearly beyond reason, but I do think that it's important to break up the funding portfolio and look at it in terms of a variety of topics: cyber physical systems, basic research and networking, research networks in support of research in other areas, cyber infrastructure, production cyber infrastructure delivered today, and the development of new cyber infrastructure for tomorrow. And the threads of those research and development activities need to go on continually so that the expertise that we build up, which is so precious, gets retained in these programs, and then while building a better workforce is, a 20-year process from a 10-year-old to a seasoned 30-year-old professional, looking at the long range and really focusing on, okay, we recognize that today there are shortages of workforces. There are short-term measures that can be put into place that will aid that in the short run, but really fundamental efforts, as Dr. Reed has already mentioned, have to be put into encouraging young people in the U.S. to pursue careers in networking and information technology.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for the value added, Ms. Edwards, you bring to our committee. Mr. Hill, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the panel members for being here this morning, in particular Dr. Stewart, who is not only chairman of CASC, but is also the associate dean at the greatest university in the history of the world, Indiana University. Dr. Stewart, it's great to have you here today. Dr. Stewart, you mentioned in your testimony the importance of consistency, and I want to return to that issue. Are you suggesting that there are inconsistencies in funding that are occurring?
I think if you look back at the past several years of funding in NITRD as implemented by the participating agencies, there have been recognitions of areas where additional funding is needed, and funding has been propped up in one area, sometimes at the expense of other areas, and that oscillation in funding really creates difficulty in maintaining the expertise base among people who really desire to pursue a career in publicly funded networking information technology research. If a program is eliminated or funding is temporarily suspended and a person leaves publicly funded, publicly oriented networking information technology research, they're not likely to come back. That expertise is lost, and the expertise, as we've heard from I believe all four of us this morning, is tremendously valuable.
And this is happening?
This has happened, yes, very definitely.
Okay. Switching gears then, one recommendation you make is to increase the coordination between federal agencies. How would you suggest that we do this, or how would you suggest this be done?
Well, I think the key point is to add to the coordination between federal agencies and add to that more coordination with colleges, universities, state investments, and regional investments. And the Coalition for Academic Scientific Computation and the EDUCAUSE Campus Cyber Infrastructure Working Group just held a workshop last week in Indianapolis to generate new ideas specifically on this topic. As Dr. Reed said, a lot of these issues have to do with the culture of academia, and I think one of the key points is to make recommendations both to academia and state-funded R&D activities that enable them to better collaborate with federally led initiatives, and to add to the federally led initiative ways that will allow that collaboration and make it more effective.
Well, then, could the NITRD planning and coordination mechanism be used as a forum for this broader level of coordination?
I do indeed. I think that's actually the best way to begin that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Well, before we thank our witnesses, and I just thought I would check and see if anyone wants to have an alternative opinion as to the world's greatest ever colossal university. Dr. Baird.
I would just point out that we're proud to have two representatives from the great state of Washington here, and we'll let that speak for itself.
Again, I want to thank our witnesses. This is we're trying to build a base of information. This is a good. You've given us a good place to move forward. We would hope that you would respond to those questions that we ask, as well as anything else as we go through this process. For all those, there are a few of us here, but there are hundreds of thousands, if not, we normally have a couple of million that watch our webcast. So there are lots of others that are out there, and we want to welcome any suggestions to this very important concern. And this hearing is adjourned.